It's not a specific diplomatic term. It's not code for anything, and we've asked White House aides specifically what they wanted it to mean. And basically, we were told there's a range of options. They wouldn't nail down whether that means further U.S. sanctions on Iran, something that might complicate that nuclear agreement that the U.S. brokered with many, many different partners. They wouldn't say whether that meant actual military action, but suggested it could mean further interdicting of weapons transfers to some of the allies that Iran works with in Yemen, in Syria, and elsewhere. So it was a bumper sticker without a policy explanation, frankly.
It also seemed as much an attack on the deal struck with Iran as much as any enmity over the firing of that missile. In talking then to officials there, what's your sense of the future for this deal?
Well, actually, I thought it was interesting that White House aides, I wouldn't say backed away, but certainly indicated that the Iran deal stands on its own when it comes to the nuclear question. While candidate Trump threatened to tear up this multilateral agreement with Russia and China and European powers to freeze Iran's nuclear program, as president, he's not saying he's going to do that yet. So they're saying separate from that deal, we are going to continue to confront Iran when it intervenes in other countries. And that, frankly, is music to the ears of our Israeli allies and many of the Arab countries who have seen Iran as the source of the problem and instability in the Middle East rather than a path to resolution, which was the Obama administration's approach. They thought if we strike this deal with Iran and stop confronting, at least rhetorically, that we can get them to back down.
Reportedly, it may have been another deal that Donald Trump finds terrible that may have been one of the issues with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and this phone call that we now know of over the weekend. Lots of different reporting about it, Margaret. But if nothing else, do we know why perhaps this call turned reportedly tense?
Well, Australian press was reporting that it really blew up, but as you heard from the Australian Prime Minister, he's far more diplomatic, saying that while it was frank, the 25-minute phone call wasn't an argument. What we've heard here is this question being raised of whether America is going to stand by its commitments, even to some of our closest allies. That's the message that the rest of the world is looking at this and worrying about. When it comes to the specific deal, the Obama administration struck this back in November with Australia to work with the UN to handpick and vet with Homeland Security and the State Department about 1,200 refugees who'd been washing up on Australian shores from other countries in the region, as well as Afghanistan, Iran, Vietnam, elsewhere, many Muslim countries in particular. So it's not clear if this was a quid pro quo, and frankly, Republicans in Congress have been demanding more details for months. What's interesting is over the weekend, the Australian Prime Minister thought Donald Trump was standing by it. These tweets now raise questions that saying he's at least going to re-examine it.
And it'll be re-examined again as we do seek out exactly what the U.S. got in return for taking those refugees. And again, Margaret, this all comes as Rex Tillerson is sworn in as Secretary of State. In talking then to your sources inside state, is there a sense that now Secretary Tillerson will bring a steadying hand in a time that has been tense, perhaps no more so than for those career diplomats at the department?
Yeah, I have to say it's going to be fascinating to hear Rex Tillerson when he addresses Foreign Service officers for the very first time today, because he's walking into one of the most demoralized buildings in Washington. It was a record number of officers who have objected formally through the dissent channel to this refugee and travel ban. And so he knows he has to sort of lift the spirits of the people who will be working for him and for American national security. But we also don't know just what that interaction is going to be. I thought it was interesting that National Security Advisor Mike Flynn came to the White House podium and laid out these very stark terms in terms of putting Iran on notice, when he could have waited a few hours and had a Secretary of State by his side to do so, someone who typically would handle this kind of diplomatic outreach or messaging with countries. But I've been told so far there's no diplomatic outreach via the UN or via other channels to Iran. This was very much about sending a clear signal and benchmark that don't challenge us here. So frankly, Josh, Rex Tillerson has his work cut out for him, whether it's Iran or the recent dust up with Mexico or Australia or some of our European allies who are deeply concerned that America is going to back away from some of its commitments.
That list does seem to grow by the day. Quickly then, Margaret, get you out of here on this one. Defense Secretary Mattis visiting with officials in South Korea this morning. What do we know of the visit?
This is about North Korea primarily and their growing nuclear threat, also concern about China and trying to reassure our allies, military allies. Remember, there are a tremendous number of U.S. troops on the ground in South Korea along that demilitarized border with North Korea, trying to assure them that the U.S. will stand by its military commitments to defend Japan and to defend South Korea in the face of those growing threats. But I've got to say, one interesting page here is former General Mattis, I'm sure, will be asked questions. Australia is a very important intelligence sharing partner for America. They basically help us spy in Asia. So disrupting that relationship could impact some of our Asia policy. And that, I'm sure, is something that the Defense Secretary Mattis is well aware of.
A lot of questions in need of answers, and I know you will be asking all of them, even if it takes you quite literally 24 hours a day. Margaret Brennan at the White House, as always. Margaret, appreciate it.